Obviously, I think it's been a wonderful 5 years with a lot of accomplishments by the entire board. And I start by looking at the construction project because I think that's where you do start. We had over 77% of the voters agreeing to the bond, and in addition, the parcel tax was even approved by a greater majority. In fact, I think it was a new record. That shows the great deal of confidence that the community has in its schools, and I took it as that. And I was on the board, obviously, one term, and then the second term, and I took that not as my personal pride, but as a community pride, that we had reached out in a way that was targeted, it was thoughtful, and people felt assured we were doing the right thing, both for their children in terms of construction and enrollment, and in terms of what we needed for teachers. And that felt pretty good. And then I do, of course, it's been 4 years into the project, and we're on budget and on time. That is a phenomenal thing when you think about people doing construction on their homes. We have an incredible team, but it's taken work, it's taken oversight by the board, and I think that's the board's responsibility. In terms of academic strength, I think there's been a wonderful variety of opportunities for kids to excel, not only academically, but in extracurricular opportunities, which I think are part and parcel of the school community. I know when I sent my kids to school, I expected them to be educated, but I wanted them to love to go to school. And for me, that meant that they had friends, they had connections, they had extracurricular activities, and I think we've built on that during my term on the board. And I was definitely used my experience as a parent to say, what do I want here? I came for the academics, but every day when your kid wants to go to school, or if they don't want to go to school, that is a huge marker. And I think we've done more to expand that, particularly in the middle schools as well. We have more schools within schools. We have more athletics at noon. We've had more anti-bullying programs, and I want to champion the fact that the construction has embraced sustainability, quiet space and play. If you notice that the new Ohlone site, in fact, it was wonderful to have the architects come in and say, okay, there's active sports, but there are ways for other kids, and there's quiet space. And so you'll see this reflected in some of the designs as ways to capture children in different degrees. On the high school level, boy, we've just done so much. Why don't we just start with Project Safety Net? I think it was a wonderful response to a critical time in the community, and I think that the school district and the city and the health community came together in a special way. I served as the board rep to the PSN, and I continue to do so, and it still draws a lot of people. People don't have to be there. We have a lot of staff from the school district attending. Probably of all the groups, the schools have the biggest number. But the community is still engaged, and this is with a new director as well, with a full-time director, of course, paid for by Stanford. So it is great to see this as an ongoing support for adolescents, and one of the things we discovered through Project Safety Net, but which certainly counselors had told us, was that there weren't sufficient medical and adolescent services in our district or in our city, not just our district, in our community. And Stanford heard that, and Dr. Joshi, who's the, you all know Dr. Joshi, heard that and is working to create more opportunities for kids' mental health services. In addition, Palo Alto University has extended its program. It's a MA and a PhD now in psychology, and particularly they're focused on adolescent health now. This all did roll out from Project Safety Net and people talking with each other, and I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I know. I was going to say this can
What
go.
were the disappointments?
What were the
you?
big disappointments? Challenges, disappointments. Boy, disappointments don't come easily to me. I see life, frankly, as challenges, and I don't see them as disappointments. So I wouldn't name a disappointment.
Where did the board underperform in your judgment?
Underperform. Well, I think the board always does well when it refreshes together as a board. I think oftentimes when you're on a board, you think you can operate as an individual. And I think that's undermines, and certainly even when I came on the board, I mean, you always think, you tend to be executive positions when you run to the board, you've been a PTA president, you're a lawyer, you're whatever, you're an individual who gets things done. And certainly when in 2003 and 2002, when I headed up the letter writing, I started that essentially on my own and people followed. So what you learn when you get on the board is how do you do things together? How do you take the initiatives of individuals and turn them into something that everybody follows? I think that is an ongoing challenge, and I think we always have to relearn how do you, we do a lot of retreats, we try to figure out how best to work with each other and with the superintendent. Clearly, I mean, the superintendent was very funny at the one forum the other night. I think one of the questions was, what do you do when the superintendent goes rogue? And I repeated that question then after the fact to say, Kevin, someone wants to know what you do. What does the board do when you go rogue? And he said, you know what? I don't always get everything right. And he said, I don't always hear everything right. And he said, it is your job to tell me when I don't get things right. And that's true. I mean, clearly on the counseling, you guys reported when I sent emails to him saying, Kevin, we're not moving the way I want to move, and someone else wrote the. More effective would have been for us to reconvene and as a group say, we're not where we need to be here. We need to move on. So how do you translate your individual actions saying, hey, I need to see things moving along a little bit more here, and then when do you make a big public debate about it and say, we've got to do something different. So is that a challenge? Yeah, that was a challenge. And that will always continue to be a challenge. When do you individually push things along, and when do you reconvene as a board in public with all 5 members and move things along? And that will always be a challenge, but I think we've learned along the way, one would hope.
I want to come back to that whole issue, but before I do, ask a more general question about your candidacy. You are the first school board trustee in decades, if not ever, to seek a third term. Can you explain your thinking as to why that is in the best interest of the community to have you serve another 4 years?
Sure. First of all, I didn't know it was that long. It was only after you guys reported that I knew it was that long. But there have been conversations. There's 2 prongs to that. First of all, we have 3 first-term people in our community stepping down. We have my colleague Barbara Klausner, we have Sid Espinoza, and we have Yahweh Ye. 3 people after only 1 term setting down. I would like to know, I mean, has it been 40 years since that all happened too? I mean, there is not a crisis of leadership, but there is a problem of leadership when, not for the individuals, people make their choices, but for our community, it is good to have a depth of experience for our community. If you look, in fact, at the state level, I mean, the voters recently changed the law so that legislators would have 12 years in the State House in one or the other, because they realize that there is experience that comes in these roles that you need to utilize. There's a learning curve. So in my particular circumstances, with that as the backdrop, Barbara Klausner and I had conversations, and she wasn't clear about whether she was going to run again or not. And so I was on notice that there would be a 1-term school board member in addition to Sid and Yahweh. And people came to me and said, Camille, they felt, in particular, they felt that the district was being pushed in ways they didn't want it pushed, and they felt I was a stable force, that I had experience, I wasn't one, and that stabilizing was really good, not only for the schools, but for our community, particularly when you look at the Cubberley process, when you look at the city-school relationships. I don't think we've had deeper relationships than we have right now. In fact, Gary Fazzino told me that. So why do I know that? I mean, we have the Cubberley process going on. We have the city school lane going on. We also have a new committee on housing growth. So the school board is stretching itself in places that it hasn't gone before. So it seems more important than ever, particularly when I hadn't planned to run. Truly, in May of this year, I sent, I'm the youngest of 8, I had sent an email out to my sisters and brother, said, the last meeting is in November, and I expect you to fly out in November. So at the end of summer, and then it wasn't, the end of summer came and everything happened with Barbara and the like, and I thought, well, I have to make a decision based upon whether she runs or not. If she did not run, then that's one decision, and if she did run, I was not going to run.
So implicit, I think, in that decision is a judgment that Heidi Emberling would not be able to make as strong a contribution on the school board as you would if reelected. Because at that time, she was the only declared candidate.
Well, there were 2 positions then, right? So if Barbara didn't run, there were 3 positions. Or Melissa, and did I make a judgment about it? You know what, frankly, I didn't think a great deal about that. I didn't know who was going to run.
So
I didn't know who was going to run, frankly, but people said, Camille, you need to step forward now.
I think you declared after both Melissa and Heidi had indicated they would be running.
And most importantly, I declared after Barbara said she wasn't on the same day. It was only then that I decided I was running.
Right.
So
my question is, you've said that people came to you concerned about the direction the district was being pushed in.
Right.
What direction are you referring to, and what is it that concerned you or people about Heidi being elected?
No, nothing concerned me about Heidi. That wasn't part of the decision. What did concern people, Gary Fazzino was one of my earliest supporters, saying, I have kids in kindergarten. You need to be back on the board. These are the conversations I got, and so.
Well, in 4 years, he's going to have kids in 4th grade.
Yes, he
is.
is.
He going to make the same comment to you?
Well, actually, I can tell you I wouldn't run again. This is a unique time, and I think it's a unique time.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to understand, is why is it unique?
I think that my knowledge, why is it unique? Because people find it unique, and people ask me so much to run. What is unique about it? Frankly, it was unusual. People really like Kevin Skelly. They really think, for the most part, he's doing a good job. And I think people felt he was unfairly under attack. And they felt that I certainly was strong enough to be directive to him when necessary, but wouldn't go over the line in what people found to be unfair attacks. So they wanted me in there because they thought I was strong, had a good relationship with Kevin, and yet at the same time didn't push it so far what people felt was over the line. And I can tell you honestly that people have felt that the superintendent, who's doing a pretty decent job in really difficult times, had been pushed way beyond what was good for the community. And they felt that I would be helpful with the rest of Melissa and whoever else would run to help him do his job. And I have been through 2 superintendents, and I think Kevin is doing a decent job. It's a very difficult position to be in, and I think you'll learn a lot. And we did take a chance when we hired him. He had never been a superintendent before, so it was a learning curve, but I think he's learning, and I want to help him do better.
I don't know if you were aware that Barbara Klausner was going to make the statement that she did regarding the breakdown in the governance process at the board meeting when the high school counseling topic was finally dealt with. But I'm wondering if you could tell us how you either agree or disagree with her perspective on that process.
First of all, no, I did not know she was going to make the statement, and you never do unless you talk with one other person, and so I did not. I thought her statement was stronger than I would have made. That's just not the way I would do it. I had let Kevin know that I wanted things to move a little bit more quickly, that I needed that despite some I understood that many of the staff at Gunn High School felt personally, not attacked is too strong a word, we're being held personally responsible for acts beyond their control. And there was a sensitivity at Gunn that Kevin was aware of. And I don't think the board knew as much as the superintendent does, because we don't get in the schools at that level so much. That there was this sensitivity, and I think they felt they were being pushed in a way that was unhealthy and being attacked in a way that was unhealthy. That, again, is in the superintendent's bailiwick, and I didn't fully understand that. So when I was pushing and saying, we got to move a little more quickly on this, aren't there these conversations going on? So, you saw my emails, so you know how I felt about that, but I tend not to do that in public so much. But, each way.
Let's talk about that, though, because the only way we know what you were thinking on that issue was because a request was made for the emails. Otherwise, we would all be in the dark.
That's true.
Is that a good way to operate on a controversial community issue?
Well, I don't think that was... every day I have conversations with the superintendent or staff or whomever. Those aren't public. Why this one? Would it have become public that I wanted him to go faster on this process? Yeah, when we would have the next meeting, you would have heard that. But would I have been, the last of my emails said, with hugs around, with arms around everybody here, we got to see things moving faster. So that's my style. Would I have said, this is a crisis of government? No, I wouldn't have done that. That's just not my style to do that. But I can say in my first term, maybe I was more abrupt in public than I would have than now I am. And that's just my learning curve, I think. In fact, I do remember it was a friend who supported me on when I first ran was very angry with me about something, and she didn't like how I handled things publicly. So we talked about it, and I learned, you just have to be gentler in public, is my feeling. I think you get directive, you say, this is what I want, and this is when I want it, but personally, I've learned.
The school board has in keeping with that tradition and culture, the school board has a tendency to not speak with a lot of clarity and as a single voice when it comes to critical issues. And certainly the counseling issue is a good example of that. There are many others where everybody talks and somehow the superintendent is supposed to take from that what the actions are of the board. Why has that been the practice, and has that, as president of the board, felt like a good process to you of not actually ever having motions and amendments to motions and adopting something on a vote?
Yeah, you know, when I came on the board, that's not how things were done. I mean, you never get an opportunity as a board to talk about these things. And so our opportunity to talk has always been in public. And so we've talked, and then at the end of that process, think, okay, where we are now? Where are we? But in response to your concern, and Dana's the superintendent, Dana, the vice president, I'm president, we're working to actually do that better. That even though the history of the school board long before us as well is that you come in public, you discuss these things, and that at the end of it, the superintendent pulls things together and then moves forward. What we're attempting to do in agenda setting is say, what is it that you want from the board? Come in and tell us exactly what is it that you want in order to make the decision that we need to make. So we're trying to, Kevin, Dana, and I are attempting to do that now. And we'll probably get better at it, but it is a different way. It's a different philosophy of how you go about doing business. And I suppose, you know, as you move more formally, will it change the dynamic? Probably not. I think not. I think it's a good move, and that's what we're doing.
So some of the issues that have come up in the past couple of years have been kind of stumbling blocks for the board. There have been some split votes, and I wanted to ask you about that in terms of process. Everyday math, you were on the 2 side versus the 3.
Right.
And then also the calendar issue. I think you said in your interview with Chris that when you have a situation in which there's 2 options and people, it just really splits the community, that there should be other processes going on. So having been through these issues, I'm wondering, what do you suggest for the next
Good question.
divisive issue that comes
Yeah.
along? What was missing also?
Well, on the everyday math issue, Kevin was a new superintendent as well, and I've always been of the belief that the school board should establish criteria by which who gets on committees. You want to make sure that in your committees you have a wide range of viewpoints that can work it out in the committee. If you have kind of a lopsided committee that doesn't have strong opinions on every side, those issues don't get worked out early on before they come to the school board. So a little bit in that context, on the homework committee with Charles, who started, say, Charles, you need on your committee a wide variety of voices who you know have thoughts and opinions about this, and that there needs to be a discussion early on in the committee before it ever comes to the school board so that these things can get worked out. And so I think it worked on the homework committee, and I think we've always been most effective when those kind of committees happen. So, for example, the middle school textbook adoption, there were many voices. You didn't hear anything about that. It was adopted easily because that got worked out in the committee. So senior staff, when they pull together committees, my direction has always been, please pull in diverse voices. That's true now on the gun committee. Again, instructed, you need diverse voices on that committee. You need different parents, too, of different kinds of students, whether it's special ed or regular ed or people who care about this issue. You know, Kathleen Blanchard is on it as well. It's a wide variety of people on the committee. So I think you have the best results when your initial committees have many voices on. And then...
And whose responsibility is that if you as a board member see a committee being developed that perhaps is a little bit lopsided? is it incumbent upon you to be talking to the superintendent, or is this a
Well,
board issue?
well, you know, actually, everything's supposed to be left to staff, but certainly as as a school board member, if I say, you know, boy, do you have all voices represented? Do you even know who these voices are? Have you asked around? So those are the questions I need to be asking staff, which I do now. And I must say that in Kevin's hiring of senior staff, you also need excellent communicators and conveners who handle the committee process. So committees are very important in how they're made up, and the head of the committee, these are all important. Are they at the board level? Well, not directly, but certainly that there needs to be a wide range of voices, and that issues get teed up really early. And if the committee needs to come to the school board for further guidance, then it needs to do so. Now, my understanding is, in fact, the gun counseling will come back to the board and say, this is what more we need from you in terms of direction. So it's a lot of work, but this is how you have to do it. And it's a way to prevent you know, handling things after they've gotten too hot and then they come to the school board to sort them out. You try to get them handled early.
What do you think happened on the calendar issue? Because I know that you felt, even when you're making the vote, that there hadn't been a case made, basically, for the
Right.
shift.
Right, and that still is moving forward. I still believe we need to, the board needs to have a meeting, or ideally, I would love to have a meeting and have a committee convene to say, what is it that we're trying to achieve in a calendar? Is it academic learning? Is it stress? Is it connections with families? Is it, you know, there's, you know, 10, 15 different things that we were attempting to do with the calendar. Well, it's very hard to do when you don't have a matrix, if you don't have a, and while I was trying to push that, I hadn't convinced my colleagues, and I think that we will, moving forward, that we do need to create what is it that we're attempting to achieve in a calendar. Now, that being said, when you talk to districts around the state, calendars are never, never easy. So we are not unique in having struggles over what the calendar should do. And then unique to us is that we're a K through 12 district. And so you have to throw that into the mix as well, because many high school districts do their thing. It's not a natural model for us because we have the elementary school kids who have a different calendar. So again, unique, it seems, to California, or at least if I compare it to the Midwest, everything was K through 12. So having these disparate school districts makes it harder for us, because people say, well, why don't we do just like they did? Well, we're not just like them, so it makes it hard. So I would like to see that. I would like to see what our goals are, and then we can start to evaluate this calendar even. Obviously, it's here for 2 years, and people have strong opinions, but people are adjusting and at the point right now, and they have to.
So if the problem, in your judgment, with the calendar debate was that it didn't get properly teed up as a problem and
Yes.
clearly identified,
Yes.
whose responsibility is that?
Well, it's the board's responsibility, and no question. And you may be in a minority in that belief, and then it's your duty to try to convince the rest of your board. And
I don't
so
mean
that's
for the decision. I mean for the process.
and that's what I'm speaking to, is for the
So,
process.
In this particular case, my recollection was that the board kept asking for better work product from the staff, that it didn't feel that the staff had presented them with the range of alternatives and the implications and the mitigations, so that you as a board could adequately judge the alternatives. My feeling was that there was never any question that the purpose behind this was to ease stress on students, especially at the higher grade levels. Maybe you have a different take on that. But are you saying that it's the board's responsibility to sort out how the staff should bring information to it, or I'm not clear on how it's the board's responsibility to
No, I think it's the board's responsibility to dictate what is it that we're trying to achieve in the calendar, and why you believe that it was all about stress. I don't believe that at all.
What do you think it was about?
Well, there are many things, and there were many things that weren't teed up properly. I mean, we had
But what
people...
besides stress?
Well, stress, time with connections with family, that's not about stress per se, but on the other hand, if we're attempting to have kids connect more with their families, their extended families and the like, when does that happen? Does it happen during summer? Does it happen during the holidays? That's not about stress per se. I mean, you could say everything's about stress, but it's not. You have to break it down a little more carefully. And when Sally Khalifa did come in and say, with regard to the issue of stress, she's saying you're creating more stress by pushing it the way you're doing it. So stress can, the term stress, some people just felt, boy, if it is stress, boy, you're not taking care of it. But it was bigger than that. People say, this is around, summer times are the one times that I have to be with our extended family. We have a huge number of families in the community who are from beyond California or even beyond our borders. And so we should have at least looked at that if our point is that we want to make more connections for kids. And, one of the things we changed the calendar, trying to accommodate families and when parents said, at the end of the year is the only time my business shuts down, but you're not giving us this time, and giving us the week in January doesn't really help me, because in the Valley we're asked to be back to work already. So there you go.